So next, we're gonna have, I need to say this. Lisa and I served on Governor Deval Patrick's readiness project on MCAS and assessment. We spent almost 9 months and provided the governor with alternative assessment, only to be told, thank you very much, but MCAS is here to stay. Lisa?
Thank you, Ruth, and I have to thank Jonathan for being who he is, an amazing person. And every time there's a certain article in the paper, I scan it. I know, oh, I bet they're going to quote Jonathan about MIT sending money to Saudi Arabia or whatever it is. And he's always there. So I'm Lisa Geisbahn. I'm the executive director of Citizens for Public Schools. It's a statewide public education advocacy organization. And I'm really proud to be with all of you today and my amazing fellow panelists. And defending the early years is like, I look to them constantly. And this the need for play-based learning is so important. And yeah, so follow them. But I want to start with a quote from Gloria Steinem. She said, the most radical thing you can do is to be understandable. So, inspired by Gloria in part, my goal for today is to present and be part of creating a vision that is radical, understandable, and of course moral. CPS's mission since 1982 has been to promote, preserve, and protect public education in public schools in Massachusetts. We believe public education is essential to our democracy because only educated people can participate fully and meaningfully in our democracy. The expectations and challenges for our public schools have been steadily increasing. Our students and teachers are constantly being asked to clear a higher and higher bar, and unfortunately still measured by these narrow and kind of meaningless standardized tests. Students and teachers face these challenges in an era of, I would say, artificial austerity. Mike and others talked about the austerity that we live in, but it's really artificial because we have the wealth. Certainly in Massachusetts, we have the wealth in this commonwealth to fund all of our human needs. And they face these challenges under the leadership of a Secretary of Education who has utter contempt for public education. Betsy DeVos showed this recently by launching her back to school tour at a private religious school in Milwaukee, where public education has been ravaged by privatization and vouchers. And we've also seen an erosion over time in our state's commitment to fully and equitably fund public education, representing a failure to fulfill the state's constitutional mandate. And the Massachusetts Constitution says, and I quote, "Wisdom and knowledge, as well as virtue, diffuse generally among the body of the people, being necessary for the preservation of their rights and liberties, and as these depend on spreading the opportunities and advantages of education in the various parts of the country and among the different orders of the people, it shall be the duty of legislatures and magistrates to cherish the interests of literature and the sciences, especially the university at Cambridge," it says. I think it's the other one. And public schools and grammar schools. But contrary to cherishing our schools, we learned in 2015 from a bipartisan state commission that the state has been underfunding K-12 public education by at least $1 billion a year, and probably closer to $2 billion a year or more. This commission, called the Foundation Budget Review Commission, or also known as the FBRC, found that the state school funding formula did not accurately reflect the increasing costs of healthcare, special education, and the cost of educating low-income children and English language learners. So to do something about this, Citizens for Public Schools joined a statewide coalition, including our friends at the Mass Teachers Association, the American Federation of Teachers Massachusetts, the Boston Teachers Union, Jobs with Justice, Youth on Board, and other grassroots and community organizations, to get the legislature and the governor to modernize our out-of-date and, I would say, immoral school funding formula. This Fund Our Future coalition backed the Promise Act, sponsored by Senator Chang Diaz and Representatives Aaron Vega and Mary Keefe, to fully implement these FBRC recommendations. There are 4 main recommendations. The Promise Act called for phased in over a number of years, $1.41 billion more per year in state education aid than the status quo, and $946.3 million more than a proposal from Governor Baker, with the biggest difference coming from resources directed to low-income students in the highest poverty schools and communities. And so these investments could go to smaller class sizes, to more art and music in school, to school nurses and librarians and counselors, all the things that students in wealthy communities take for granted, but are considered unattainable luxuries in many low-income districts. The good news is that a bill has finally emerged in the legislature that closely follows the contours of the Promise Act that we've been supporting. I brought some fact sheets for those who are interested in details of the bill. The Senate is going to debate the bill next week, and our coalition is going to be at the State House on Thursday to support the passage of the best possible version of the bill, because as you know, when it goes through the legislative process, like, good things can get taken out and bad things can get put in, so we want to make sure that doesn't happen. But we're pretty optimistic and excited about the nature of the bill now, and it's been a struggle for years to get that. But there's more to do to fulfill the promises of the Promise Act, the Student Opportunity Act. The state needs to raise more revenue for public ed, and one day to do that, as was mentioned earlier by Lee, is through the Millionaire's tax. And that would levy an additional 4% on income above $1 million in any given year. So all of you who earn $1 million a year would have to pay 4% more on the amount over $1 million a year. And that money would be earmarked for public ed and public transportation. And there are other ways that we could raise progressive tax revenue, and Mass Budget, which Mike and others mentioned as an incredible resource, has 14 different ways that we could raise progressive tax revenue to fund all of our human needs. So it's immoral that we've gone for so many years without fulfilling our constitutional obligation to fund our public school students. Passing this bill would make a huge difference, but we're really still talking about the minimum that our students need to thrive and succeed in school. So a truly moral budget would do much more than that and really tackle long-standing structural inequities. Meanwhile, there's a human cost being borne by our teachers and students. Time's up. All right, I'm almost done. Especially our low-income students, students of color, and English language learners. And Boston public school teachers said this week, we had to beg for full-time nurses in every school. We still don't have full-time counselors in every school. Most schools have no librarian. Our water pipes are filled with lead. We lack appropriate heating and cooling. In this rich city, our youth are not prioritized. As I said, it's artificial austerity. So with a truly moral budget, we could do so much more. Thank you.